Welcome to the Configure Price Quote Podcast. My name is Frank Sohn and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My first guest today is Anandan Jayaraman. It's called AJ, so which I should have noted, right? But he's the vice president of the lead to cash product portfolio at ServiceNow, and he brings a wealth of experience from leadership roles at SAP, Oracle, and several SaaS and analytics startups across the US, Israel, and India. And he is currently based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Very excited to have him. Welcome, Anandan, to the CPQ podcast.
It was great to be here, Frank, and thank you for having me and Chris on. I lead product management for the lead to cash portfolio for ServiceNow, as you said. I've been here for the last 2 years, but I have spent most of my career in the CRM and CPQ markets. I worked in a variety of product and delivery roles in large companies, Siebel, SAP, Epiphany, was also at multiple venture-funded startups. And just before ServiceNow, I led a boutique consulting firm with specific focus on sales transformation. And we work closely with vendors and enterprises in the space. And ServiceNow was one of our customers, and that's what led me into this job. So great to be here again.
Very excited to have you, AJ, and always excited to have Chris Schutz, right? So most of you probably know him. He's the co-founder and CEO of Logik and a returning guest on the CPQ podcast. Chris is a well-known figure in the CPQ space. He previously co-founded Big Machines, which was acquired by Oracle in 2013, and he lives with his family in Chicago. Very excited to have him back. Welcome back to CPQ podcast, Chris.
Yeah, hi Frank. Great to see you again. Great to have another discussion with you about what's going on in CPQ. We've had a pretty good 4.5 years with Logik, and we're super excited to see where this goes with ServiceNow.
So are a lot of people. So I'm very excited to have you both here to talk a little bit more about that today. And let's start maybe with AJ. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at ServiceNow and what you did at these other companies before you joined ServiceNow?
Okay. Yeah, I talked about a little bit about that in my introduction. So CPQ has, for good or bad, been a part of my career ever since I started. Then going back to Siebel Systems, I was the lead product manager for CPQ for telecom. And as you know, has been a tortured space, and it has been through a lot of ups and downs over its history. But the one thing I've always found fascinating about CPQ, Frank, and you know this well from your podcast, is CPQ is at the heart of what companies do, the products and services they build, how do they bundle it, how do they price it, how do they go to market. It is a monetization engine. And I feel like when companies get it right, it creates a sustainable competitive advantage. It is a pretty big deal when you get it right. At the same time, when you don't get it right, it can also cause you a lot of challenges. But I think the fun of this job and the joy of this job, and I think Chris would agree, is when we get it right and customers get a lot of value out of becoming easier to do business with, it's a huge thing. And that's what we really live for and do this job.
Excellent. So for Chris, it's very hard to ask him again for an introduction. He was on a podcast before. I guess most of the people know him anyway. But maybe a good question is to ask, what drove you at the time to really start Logik? What was the driving thought behind it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Frank, and I get asked that a lot from customers and prospects because the obvious question people have is like, why does the world need another CPQ solution? And when I retired from Oracle about 5 years ago, we started looking at the market, and we realized that a lot of the existing CPQ solutions were monolithic in nature. They weren't composable, they weren't headless, and they really were not following where the selling personas were going. So one of the things that's interesting about CPQ is it's very complicated typically, and the user personas are very demanding because the user personas are sales reps. They're typically impatient. They typically don't have a propensity to do a lot of training. They're handling complex deals. And so it's sort of a worst case scenario for an enterprise app. And what was happening in the market was the big players were not catering to that persona, meaning make it easy to use, flexible, and super, super performant. for all these different scenarios. And that was really when we started looking at the market more and more, we realized that there's a huge opportunity here to really transform CPQ. And that's what we did with Logic.
Excellent. We talk more about that in a minute, but another question for AJ was you worked in the US, Israel, and India, and you have lots of international experience also, right? So, and I was wondering, what are your key learnings up to this point that you think are key for your job right now with Logic also and ServiceNow?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, Frank. I think Israel and India, particularly, I felt like they were such fascinating places to work. And I grew up in India, and I obviously know that country a lot better. But, in Israel, people are very direct at the workplace, unafraid to challenge each other. So you see fights break out in the office all the time, and, very good-natured, challenging each other, bringing the best out of each other. India is very subtle. You have to read a lot between the lines to know how people actually feel. And the other thing I found was meetings in Israel are super organized and purposeful. India, on the other hand, would look super chaotic at the outset. But the work ethic is remarkable and the teams are very reliable and impactful. And the US is, of course, the ultimate melting pot. But the biggest learnings for me, I would say, is that, irrespective of culture, people are mostly the same. And if you treat them with empathy and if you're authentic as a leader, you can get the best out of these teams. And but you do have to understand the cultural differences and the subtle variations in behaviors across these places.
Excellent. My next question is for Chris, and I think it's a little bit early to ask the question. I ask it anyway, and that is, so now you have built Logic, you've sold it to ServiceNow. I guess you will stay on for a little while, obviously, but what's next for you? What's really a driving factor for you as the next goal beyond that?
Yeah, I do plan to stay at ServiceNow for a very long time. It's a lot of fun doing these integrations. And I think what's really cool about ServiceNow is this business is growing pretty fast. I think ServiceNow now is about 10 and a quarter billion overall, growing, I think 15% in aggregate, some areas much faster. And so that combined with the fact that we've got a really cool technology in CPQ is going to make for a fun couple of years here as we build out the CRM portfolio at ServiceNow and really take this next generation CPQ to the masses. So that's really kind of my primary focus, and I'm excited to just kind of stay with the business. It's a great culture. One of the things people say, how's ServiceNow going? And one of the things I tell them is it feels like a $10 billion startup to me. And it feels a lot different than a lot of other big companies that I've worked with as either a supplier or as an employee. And I think that's really exciting.
Excellent. Then, AJ, one question for you that I ask all the guests that come to the podcast is also, what do you like to do when you don't work? I hope you have some time where you don't work.
Yeah, I sure do. One thing I love to do, Frank, is love playing the piano on the keyboard. That does allow me to decompress a lot. I love playing table tennis with my kids. That's super fun. And I love teaching APCS as well, which is CS course for high schoolers. I don't do as much of it as I would like to, but teaching is also something I hopefully get to do more time to do that going forward.
Oh, very cool. So, excellent. Then let's go ahead and talk about ServiceNow, right? And the first question is again for you, AJ, and that's why was right now the best time for ServiceNow to enter the CPQ space more aggressively through this acquisition?
Yeah, that's a good question, Frank. So let me just take you back a little bit, right? As you know, ServiceNow started in 2004. And while the company started as a tech workflow business with products like ITSM, IT service management, IT operations management, we also built out a large business in customer service over the last decade, and a lot of people don't know that. And this is a multi-billion-dollar business, and it includes some of the world's largest brands in telecom, tech, logistics, retail companies like DHL, the Department of Defense, Siemens, Starbucks, British Telecom. And many of these customers have been telling us over the last few years that they feel underserved with the existing tools they have in sales, CPQ, and order management. And we started aggressively investing in the sales side of CRM a few years back, and we launched a product called Sales and Order Management in early 2024, which spans opportunity management, quoting, order management, and contracts. And it turned out to be one of our most successful products last year. And ServiceNow also turns out to be an early investor in Logic, going back to the seed round. And we know Chris and the founders well, and we had a front row seat to the company's evolution and the momentum. And like Chris said, they were looking to reimagine CPQ and transform the way that companies implement it. And we felt like this was the right time for us to accelerate our momentum in the sales CRM, and the acquisition happened at the right time. So when we started the discussions last December, it was obvious to us that the team and the product and the customers they have would be a great addition to ServiceNow.
Then tell me a little bit more how Logic exactly fits into this vision of becoming a CRM and revenue operations platform.
Right. So revenue operations for us, the way we think about it is it spans Salesforce automation, CPQ, order management, legal contract generation, integration to billing, and subscription management. So we think of CRM as sales, service, and fulfillment, and what you call as a revenue ops is a part of sales. And Logic fits into the CPQ part of the RevOps, right? So to us, from a product perspective, Logic substantially enhances ServiceNow with three key capabilities. The first one is a world-class configuration engine that solves for speed, scale, and simplicity. And like Chris talked about, the work they have done at Bit Machines, the company has done it before, and the team has built capabilities like this in the past. And so he often talks about it as a third pancake. And so this addresses a lot of the gaps they have had in previous iterations. And they fundamentally have reimagined how CPQ should be, more fun, more immersive, more composable, more headless. The second thing is that this space has had a lot of challenges with usability going back a long time, right? Because it was built for complexity, but then when people use it, they don't like it. No salesperson ever got up in the morning saying, I want to use my CPQ tool. But I think the way Logic thinks about it is that this should be an Amazon type user experience. It should be gaming, it should be fun, and it should work for any persona, be it a salesperson, be it a partner, be it a customer themselves. And the third thing we liked a lot about the company was that everything was headless and microservices, and it was composable. And we know that large enterprises sometimes want to build custom front ends. Sometimes they want to call your engine from a third party system. And they want the option of going with your native UX or using it headless. They want to use parts of what you have while composing it with something else. And Logic, having started the company in 2021, really hits on all these points. And this is one of the reasons why we love the company and the founders and the team.
Excellent. Now, one question for you, Chris, which I saw raised lots of interest from listeners of the podcast as well as from other CPQ stakeholders. That was the price for which ServiceNow acquired Logic, right? So there was, I think, an article in a Chicago outlet or something, and that was talking about 500 million. Tell me a little bit more about it, or as much as you can about it.
Yeah, I mean, you've done your homework, Frank, but unfortunately, we can't talk about the terms of the deal. That was just one of the conditions that that ServiceNow wanted us to abide by. But I'll say that the acquisition process, as AJ alluded to, started in December, right around Christmas. We started having our first discussions, but prior to that, it was pretty interesting. In Q3, I was flying back from India. And I finished reading Bill McDermott's book, Winner's Dream. And if your listeners have not read that book, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book. And it just kind of reads like a story about his life growing up and how he built out his career. And I just had finished the book flying back, and I had a layover in Frankfurt Airport. And I had a mutual friend that was friends with Bill. I had not met him at the time. And I had his email address. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to send Bill an email and tell him I enjoyed the book. And 10 minutes later, he replied, and I think it was like 3:00 in the morning in California. And he's kind of notorious for having just very fast, very responsive with his communications, and that is certainly the case. And he replied, and he's like, "Oh, thank you." And he said, "I know a lot about Logik. We've been following you closely." And so that was kind of Q3, and we started doing deals with ServiceNow, and it was an excellent natural fit with the cultures, which was great. And then we started having discussions in December, and then in January, we sent our team of Jeff, Fazil, Richard, and myself to Santa Clara and met with AJ and the rest of the CRM team and just started looking at our technology and the ServiceNow technology. And I will say that it's interesting, things almost kind of fit together like two Lego bricks. It was almost in a lot of areas like we had kind of designed the products to fit together. There's a few exceptions around the data model and things, but our microservices architecture actually makes it pretty easy for us to put it into the ServiceNow environments and data centers and have a seamless experience for the users, both from the what we call the buy side, the user sales persona side, and also the admin side. And then we did some of that due diligence, and then 5 months later, the deal closed on May 30th. And it was overall a pretty drama-free process. I think the ServiceNow team was very thoughtful in the process. They do have some experience acquiring companies, but not at the scale of like an Oracle. Like Big Machines was actually the 100th company that Oracle had acquired. But what I liked about the ServiceNow team was that they were thoughtful. They listened to us. We worked together. It was a pretty smooth process. And I think at the same time, we had built a fairly clean company at Logik because, as AJ mentioned, this was like our second and third pancake, which is always better than the first pancake when you cook them. And that also helped. But that was sort of how the whole process came together.
Got it. Then let me ask AJ also, right? So from your perspective, what were the biggest hurdles during these discussions? So it sounded like a very smooth process, but I guess there were some hurdles along the way.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had discussions on integrating the technology and how would it fit into the data model and the constructs that ServiceNow has. Like what parts of Logik would fit into what parts of ServiceNow. So those were the conversations. We were very convinced about the team. And the other thing I would also mention, Frank, is they have customers who have used them for a while. So usually when you buy, this is not super early stage, but when you look at startups or companies that have raised Series B as an example, often they have sold, but they have not renewed and expanded. So Logik is an example in which they have had customers who they sold an initial deal, which might have been a POC, but then the POC went well, there was proof of value, and they had expanded it to other products, other channels. A year had passed, and the company had renewed and had another expansion on top of that. So when you see that customers are voting with their wallets and they are continuing to invest into Logik, that is also proof that there's something in here, right? And many of these customers are replacing Salesforce Revenue Cloud in some cases. In some situations, they're replacing custom solutions. In some cases, they are coexisting with existing CRMs that they have. So we saw a whole spectrum of scenarios that gave us the confidence that this would complement ServiceNow really well. So I would agree with Chris. The process was pretty smooth on both sides. And there were obviously discussions we had on how things would work from a technology product perspective, but I thought it went very well.
Struggling to choose the right CPQ solution? You're not alone, and that's exactly why the CPQ briefing subscription from Novice CPQ exists. For just $499 a year, you get immediate access to unbiased, expert insights on today's leading CPQ vendors, so you can stop guessing and start making confident decisions. These briefings are built to save you time, avoid costly mistakes, and get your project on the right track, fast. Used by CPQ buyers around the world, it's your shortcut to smarter vendor evaluations. Learn more now at novicpq.com. That's novuscpq.com, and make your next CPQ move your best one.
The next question is for you, Chris. How did your customers react once they learned about the acquisition?
Yeah, for the most part, I would say all of them reacted positively. When you acquire a company, there's a lot of complexities to how's the team going to change? Am I going to have the same CSM that I work with, on a weekly basis? Is support going to change? Are you going to be there, Chris? Because I have your cell phone number and I like calling you. There's lots of those questions. But customers were positive, and our plan that we're executing on is we're going to continue to support kind of 3 delivery models. So one is continue to support Salesforce customers and grow that ecosystem. So we have probably 80% of our install base. Certainly, we have a lot of Fortune 1000 customers, and most of them run Salesforce on the front end. And they use our configurator or our P&Q in some form. And they like the fact that they can mix and match that with Salesforce Revenue Cloud if needed. And we're going to continue to support that. We see that as a big growth area for us. We think there's an opportunity there to continue to make Salesforce customers happy with Revenue Cloud, or even just run Logik for everything. That's one delivery model. The second one is obviously ServiceNow. So we are investing a lot in our technology to work seamless with the ServiceNow front office suite of CRM and order management and CPQ, as well as field service management and customer service management. And then the third piece, which I kind of call standalone, which is a little bit misleading, but we have a lot of customers that run our technology standalone. So we're the only app, and they authenticate into us from a website or from HubSpot or some other app. But the majority of the standalone customers actually run our stuff inside of like a Shopify or an Adobe e-commerce, and we're getting a lot of traction in the e-commerce market. So a lot of these B2B companies and even some B2C companies that we work with, they want to continue to sell through a direct sales force or distribution third-party channel, but they are taking some of their transactions and saying, hey, customers, come to our website, configure the product yourself, learn about our products that way using Logik, and then complete the transaction like in a Shopify, or we'll submit that into our CRM as a lead, and then we'll have somebody follow up with you. And almost all the deals we're doing now, there is a Shopify component or some type of e-commerce component like that in the app. So that's kind of the third deployment model. And then the other part of just how are the customers reacting? We did, as part of the acquisition, ServiceNow did make job offers to all of our employees at Logik, and we had a 100% acceptance rate. So there's no turnover. So customers are still working with the same people. We will obviously switch over like our support systems to ServiceNow, but we're going to have a long coexistence for those technologies that are certainly customer facing. And we are aggressively over communicating with the customer so they don't see any type of a service interruption. And the last point I'll make is we had a customer advisory board meeting last week, which we had close to 50 customers on it. And we're also keeping, in particular, a very personal touch with them. So I made sure that they all had my cell phone number, my LinkedIn, my email. They can call me anytime, because we understand as these transitions happen, it's possible that some communication could get lost, and they can get a hold of me, personally anytime, and I'll be sure to help them get the help that they need.
Excellent. There was a lot of very interesting stuff, and I know lots of listeners will be interested in that too. I just want to pick one, that was that you keep offering the product on Salesforce, right? So I saw there was quite some discussion if that would continue or not, because I think you know that from your previous experience as well at Oracle, right? So it was offered on Salesforce for a while, and then it wasn't, right? So I think that's very interesting. Anyway, before I ask the next question, let's also ask AJ, how did your customers react when they learned that they now could use Logik as a ServiceNow solution?
Yeah, I think I would say our customers were super excited, and they are looking forward to seeing the integrated solution rolled out to them. So the one thing I would say, Frank, about ServiceNow is that we have a very strong product ethos, unlike a lot of other companies I've worked with, right? So this idea of a single data model, one platform, one architecture in ServiceNow is not a marketing narrative. It is real. And the company believes in it, and it goes to the heart of how the company works internally. So the logic capabilities are going to be seamlessly baked in and integrated into ServiceNow. And the microservices architecture Chris talks about, it makes it a lot easier for us to do that. And we will have a unified experience for admins as well as end users. So our customers are very much looking forward to having this integrated CRM solution, which has logic capabilities embedded in it. And we also have quarterly releases in the space. So I think a lot of the innovations that Logic is bringing to the market, they're going to be released on a quarterly basis starting, I think, in September. And we are going to be adding, things in self-service and pricing, agentic sales workflows. So I think it's going to be a core part of ServiceNow's cadence in the CRM space.
Excellent. So, but let's follow up a little bit on what we discussed just a minute ago, right? So these hybrid environments where you potentially have some ServiceNow, you have some Salesforce, you may have something else, especially for enterprise customers. How flexible will this combined solution be going forward? What would you say to that, to customers who have that question?
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing to serve it up in a composable nature, which I think is something customers really like. So we have, customer, like particularly with Salesforce, we have a lot of customers that just use our configurator and our pricing engine. And then we have some that just use our quote management system inside of Logic. And we're going to continue to offer those as separate options if they want. We have developed some packages with ServiceNow. So for example, if it's a net new customer that's replacing like a custom solution, they can buy the entire CPQ suite, and that includes CLM on ServiceNow, quote generation on ServiceNow, approvals on ServiceNow, our quote management system in Logic, and our configurator and pricing engine with the pricing characteristics inside the ServiceNow platform. So it's a really cool solution. Actually, what's interesting is before the acquisition, we had a couple customers that were struggling with like quote approvals, and they were actually taking our composable technology and building custom integrations into ServiceNow to do quote approvals. So that was like a cool thing that customers were actually like dragging us in that direction. And we realized like, yeah, we should productize this. ServiceNow's got the best workflow engines in the business and make that part of our standard CPQ offering. So that's what we've done. So I think to answer your question, Frank, we're maintaining flexibility, but also giving customers like a ton more capability and especially when it comes to AI. So we had, one of the things that we had done at Logic, which we've been working on for several years, was applying AI to kind of two personas. One is the admin. So how do we make the CPQ admin life easier with AI? And the second persona is how do we make the sales reps life easier with AI? And our customers love the things that we're doing in AI, and it's just like a gold mine. It's like every single day we find some new cool agentic feature we can add to CPQ to make those two personas happier. And now with the ServiceNow platform and all the things they're doing with AI, now we can apply much broader agentic functionality into CPQ and do things like listen to a call recording that a sales rep has with their customer, take the call recording, and then automatically generate a quote and send it to the customer. So you can imagine how cool it is when you're a sales rep, you have a 20-minute call with your customer, you record it, hang up the phone or hang up the Zoom meeting, and 90 seconds later, the customer has a proposal with a customized cover letter. It has all the configuration, the sales bomb, pricing, everything they need. So you can imagine what that can do to a sales process, especially top of funnel sales process where you have lots of opportunities. So it's lots of volume, lots of activity. And as you then take those deals, you can personalize it more as you work them down funnel. Those are the things that we're doing that are very excited. Customers love it, and we can just go so much faster now with the capabilities at ServiceNow.
And for AI, we will talk about that in a minute, right? So I just
Yeah.
want to go back a little bit to the architecture just to clarify that question. So, because I just want to make sure. So the solution itself is maintained on one platform on your own, or you maintain it on the ServiceNow platform, you maintain it on the Salesforce platform. So just want to make sure everyone understands how much maintenance work you're getting yourself into if you offer the solution on all these platforms, right? Because I've seen
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about that, Frank, is that we actually don't run the solution on the Salesforce platform. So we run a connector app, which then talks to Logic. So it's a seamless experience inside Salesforce, and it manages all the user authentication. We do all the data syncing with the product to records. So it's a very there's no dual user maintenance or anything like that. But we host the application, prior to acquisition at Google and GCP, and that's a series of microservices. That architecture will continue to stay the same, except for the hosting footprint will likely move into ServiceNow data center. So a good example of this, if you think about a microservice, is the core rules engine runs as a microservice. So if you're using the configurator and you've got 100 options and you make an option change, that then calls the microservice and passes the data, and the rules engine processes it in 50 milliseconds and then returns it back to the user. So we can take that microservice for the configurator and we can just dump that into the ServiceNow data center. And there's no data, architecture changes we have to make to that microservice. We just run it in the ServiceNow data center, and we can send calls to that microservice from ServiceNow or from Salesforce or wherever we're hosting, wherever the app is being used, from the end customer. So that's kind of an example. Now, if you go a layer down, there are some data architecture changes we will do for ServiceNow specific customers so that they can use the data elements within the platform to standardize things like account records, opportunity records, things like that might be needed for like quote approvals or quote pricing calculations, stuff like that. So hopefully that clarifies it a little bit.
No, I think that's very helpful for lots of listeners, right? So to understand where this is going. Now, I want to go back to AI, what you mentioned before. So you mentioned this user use case, right? So where you can listen to what the customer tells you and then generate the quote. You also have some other things on the admin side, for example, that you can do now because you have ServiceNow's AI as the backbone.
Yep. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we launched Function Assist. So this is an admin function where you can use a large language model, and you can ask the admin module in Logic to write a rule for you. So you could say, create a function that queries table A, matches the third column on product name, returns a value, multiplies it times 10, and then submits it into an attribute field in the configurator. And then it'll actually write the advanced function for you. And then you can then choose to deploy it into production or not. So we've done that. We've also done some very sophisticated AI applications in rule search and finding rules, combining rules, which is a common admin trick that they have to sort of work their way through with other solutions. And we've also applied AI to all of our help articles. So we've got about 1,000 help articles that run in admin, and much the way like people are using AI today instead of Google search, you can ask it a question. It'll actually give you a thoughtful response. Like, what's the difference between an exclusion rule and a calculation rule, for example? And it'll give you like a natural language, response to that. And then we have also launched about a year ago this function we call Smart Predict, which runs on the other side of the app for the sales reps, or end users, where it'll analyze the way you're filling out a configuration screen. And then it'll actually suggest, like, would you like me to finish filling this out for you based on the most common relationships that they see from the way other people have configured it. So you can imagine that's really interesting for a rep in a top of funnel scenario, and also for an end customer doing a lead gen, where they're interested in your product, but they're not really sure how to answer all the configurator questions. So Smart Predict will do that. And then we've also done in our quote manager where you can do natural voice to function. So, for example, a rep can just talk to our quote screen and say, discount all the hardware line items 20%. And it'll just go through the whole quote screen and do that automatically. And so there's a lot of cool voice functions that we've added to help that persona. And then the part of it that we've just finished doing research on and started to bring to market is this interpretation of meeting summaries direct to quote. And that's an interesting sort of leap to get to work, which is cool. But that also opens up a whole bunch of other pieces of AI functionality that we can then add. So customers can choose to then build all that stuff into agents and then take kind of standard work functions that a sales rep might do and actually automate that with AI, which is really cool.
I'm pretty sure. Sorry, AJ.
No, I was going to say that to add to what Chris just said, ServiceNow is all in on agentic. As you know, and over the last couple of years, we've made significant investments on the AI layer at the platform level in ServiceNow. So one of the things we're looking to do is on the CPQ side, how can we take all the goodness we have that Logik has built and bake it into what the ServiceNow AI platform does. So we do have different levels of autonomy within ServiceNow, things that are fully autonomous sales workflows, like say a virtual sales agent, to things that are mostly human driven, like large enterprise deals, which are high value, which would need a lot of assist, like Chris said. How can you help him create a code? How can you help him find the right discount, apply it to all the line items? How can you do early renewals, things like that? So I think it's a great combination because they have thought about this a lot, have deep domain expertise, and we have invested a lot on the AI platform. And so it'll be cool to bring some of these things to market later this year.
Now, I think AI is very exciting. You see it in a lot of different places. I'm pretty sure we will talk about this and much more in the not too distant future. Now, let me ask one practical question also for the Logik partners, right? So Logik had quite a number of system implementation partners. How does their relationship continue with ServiceNow now from your point of view, AJ?
Yeah, so ServiceNow has a huge partner ecosystem, as you know, right? So we are doing two things. One is for existing ServiceNow SI partners. They are excited about Logik and they are going through Logik training. And as they understand Logik capabilities, they would be able to do end-to-end implementations of ServiceNow, including Logik. The other part of it is Logik partners who have been implementing the solutions today. And these partners are now also becoming ServiceNow partners. So some of them who have done many Logik implementations are now being trained on other ServiceNow products, including CSM, sales and order management. So we see this as a very synergistic thing in which we would expand the capacity available to implement ServiceNow products. And this space, as you know, Frank, is a lot about domain expertise. Yes, knowing the product is one thing, but you need SIs who know the domain well, who understand the complexity of CPQ, who understand what it means to integrate it into an enterprise landscape. And a lot of Logik partners come with the domain expertise, so we think it's a very positive thing for ServiceNow.
Excellent. Anything to add from your point of view, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with everything. Obviously, AJ said. I've talked to a lot of partners recently, and a lot of them are becoming ServiceNow partners. So it's a great thing actually, and they're servicing our technology with Salesforce customers, with ServiceNow customers, and they see it as a big growth opportunity for their businesses. So it's a great time for them.
Excellent. So now I ask you a question where I'm not sure if you can or want to answer. I ask it anyway, right? So because over the last couple of years, it was rather quiet in the CPQ environment, right? So you had some announcement here and there that there were investments or maybe an M&A or something like that. I hear more about that right now again, only from a handful of companies. But still, I was wondering, is ServiceNow now done from an acquisition point of view with Logik, or you foresee potentially more acquisitions in the future that expand in different areas? Either pricing, revenue recognition, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, it's a good question, Frank. So the way we think about this is we want to build the best product for the market and meet customers' needs, and we want to be truly differentiated. We want to build a solution that we will build in 2025, not something we may have built even 5 years back because technology is changing fast. And we have a bias towards building things in ServiceNow because we want to keep it coherent in the platform. But we do make exceptions, right? If we see a company like Logik with technology that is truly differentiated and they have reimagined how a solution would look like for a space, we would be very open to M&A. But we always think about it as is it 1 + 1 = 3, or is it going to be a product that is going to be disconnected? So that synergy needs to be there for us to see, and of course the team and the company has to fit the culture of ServiceNow. So if all of that is additive, we would be open to it. But our default is to build it organically so that the solution is cohesive and coherent. But we are always open.
Excellent. That's what I would expect, right? So from a larger company to be open to that. Now, I think that's all very interesting. I guess lots of listeners will be interested to learn more about it, to meet you potentially face to face. Is there anything in the near future where folks can meet you face to face, any kind of industry event or anything where they can meet you beside the website? I mean, that's a given.
Well, let's see. The Knowledge event, which is the big event for ServiceNow, is almost a year away now. We just had one about a month ago. I will actually be at Dreamforce. We have a series of meeting rooms there. I'd be happy to meet any of our customers or anybody else that wants to talk at Dreamforce. That's probably the next big event around the corner.
Excellent. We will have that in the show notes as always. Now, last question is really, what's a good way for interested listeners to follow up with you in case they have any follow-up questions for you or your teams? Let's start with AJ. What's the best way for people to contact you if they want to?
Yeah, they can contact me by email would be the best way to reach me. Anandan.jayaraman@servicenow.com. And Frank, you can probably add it in your show notes. And Chris?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty good about replying to messages if you want to ping me there. And also, we'll put my email in the thread. It's just christopher.schutz@servicenow.com. And happy to hear from any of you.
Perfect. And as always, we will have all this information in the show notes. So thank you very much, both of you, for making time for the CPQ podcast today.
Thanks, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.